Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. This is our 10th episode of the Restaurant Realty Dealmaker Show. I'm Steve Zimmerman, the founder and CEO of Restaurant Realty, which is the largest restaurant brokerage in California, which has sold more restaurants, bars, clubs, and other food service related businesses than any other brokerage in California over the past 27 years. I'm a former restaurant chain owner, and currently I'm a restaurant and hotel landlord. This show is designed to discuss relevant topics relating to sales, leasing, and acquisitions of restaurants, bars, and clubs. My co-hosts have been included successful restaurant realty company agents, a hospitality attorney, and a prominent restaurant owner. And in this case today, a past successful restaurant owner who's also an active restaurant consultant. Today, I am delighted to welcome Louise Franz, who I had the pleasure of working with in selling her restaurant Pizzalina in San Anselmo during COVID. Louise has been in the restaurant business for almost 5 decades in various capacities, which she'll be sharing with you, and has some very interesting experiences to share with us today from her restaurant operations side as well as her designer side. She was a designer for maybe almost 20 years, and which she will get into as well. And we welcome questions during the show. So if you'd like to go to the question bar, question and answer bar, type in your question, and during different times of the show, we will answer the questions. If by some chance we get too many questions and we don't have time to answer them, we'll get back to you after the show, so you get to respond to those questions. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Louise the first question, which is, Louise, tell us something about your background in the business and how you got started and how you became so successful.
Okay, thank you, Steve. First of all, I really want to thank you for inviting me to the show. I'm very grateful to be here and hope that anything I can share and impart will help others who are looking to dive into this or who already have or looking for locations. I'm just here to share my experiences in starting and then selling a restaurant, Pizzalina. But my background, so I got started in this many years ago. I think I got my first job at 16. I got a job at a Coco's restaurant. It was down the street. They were opening up, and I went in with an application and a fake ID and got myself a job, and my very first job. And they were just starting to open, so it was excellent training. They put you through 2 weeks of everything. The first week was all, how to do it. Then the second week was just all experimental. It was like acting at the table, in faux restaurant service. And I had some great mentors there, some people who had been experienced in doing this for a lot longer, who kind of took me under their wing. And it was a perfect fit. I fell in love with the business. I fell in love with taking care of people. I sort of always had this nature in me. I was the oldest child in my family, and so I was sort of the caretaker. And I love people. I've always been kind of a social person, so it really fit. From there, I wound up, I worked in a couple little small places, one over in Walnut Creek called New York West. I was a baker there for a while. A friend of mine said, hey, they want to make bread, and everybody knew I made bread. So they said, why don't you come in? And so I would go in late at night and bake bread and make cheesecakes for the restaurant. After that, I wound up, I'd always been involved in arts as well. So I had wound up moving to Colorado with some friends to open a little leather goods store. And I wound up working it was in Aspen. And so I had 2 restaurant jobs there just to kind of make ends meet. It was an expensive town to live in. And so I worked there in Colorado. And then I wound up missing home. My whole family lives here. So I wound up coming home. And I got a job in working for a professor at Cal and running their office. So I got a little bit of help, or learned a little bit about, you know, being like a secretary and running their office, and, you know, wasn't quite a good fit for me. I thought I would try something else other than restaurants, and kind of kept wanting to go back to restaurants. And I thought, okay, this is terrible. And somebody showed me an ad in the paper for this new restaurant that was opening up called the Santa Fe Bar and Grill. And I went down and filled out an application, and I got hired immediately. And the rest really is history, because that was Jeremiah Tower's restaurant, and he was working there. And Mark, that's where I met Mark Franz, my ex-husband. And I met so many people in the business. That's kind of what started my whole career in fine dining. Because from there we went on to Jeremiah opened Stars, and I helped open Stars, where I worked for many, many years, and until I had my son. And then I kind of took a backseat and started doing more of my artwork, just so that I could still have some source of income and something to do while Mark was running the restaurants, because that was a 24/7 job. So that's how I got into the business. And I've met everybody through there. It was a great, exciting time in the restaurant business. There were so many wonderful restaurants and chefs coming up through that time. All of the people in the Bay Area that have made this area such a great food destination.
Well, thank you.
That's how I got.
So how did you decide to get into since you were in fine dining all those years, and I know you worked at Water Bar, which, has a great reputation, and you worked at, with the restaurant in Berkeley. By the way, excuse me, what was that building before Jeremiah converted it into the Santa Fe? Was that a church or something?
No, it was the railroad depot.
Oh, is that what it was? Yeah, it's a very interesting building.
It was a beautiful building, and they did a lot of restoration on it. Mark Miller had it before there.
Oh, right.
4th Street Bar and Grill.
What is Mark doing these days?
I really don't know. I haven't kept in contact with him.
He had a great reputation.
Yeah, opened the Coyote Grill or Cafe in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Right. So your entree into the pizza business was working at as a pizza apprentice at Pizzeria Rosso, is that right? In Santa Rosa?
So here's how I wound up with Pizzalina. I had, let's see, backtrack. Yeah. So once I left the restaurant business when our son was born, so that I could be a mom. Mm-hmm. And life goes on, and Mark and Jeremiah had parted ways, and Mark partnered with Pat Kuleto to open Fairlawn and Water Bar and Epic, and also Nick's Cove, which unfortunately didn't go so well, but we didn't make it as a couple. We wound up getting divorced, and I knew that I had to get back to work. I'd been trying some art glass, and I was working in a tile shop. Mark and I had built a house, so I had some experience with design, and so I worked for a tile place, and I knew I was just unhappy. I knew none of that was going to work. It wasn't really my first love, the restaurant business. And Mark and I had always talked about opening our own restaurant, but he had a good thing going with Jeremiah and with Pat Kuleto, and he was very happy working where he was working. He's like, why would I work twice as hard for less money? So why would I try and open my own business? It's risky. I don't want to do that. So that never transpired. And so when we got divorced, I knew I had to get back to work and do something. And I was trying all these things, and it's funny, I kind of believe in fate. I believe that everything you've done in your whole lifetime kind of comes back around and works for your good when the right thing comes along. And I remember I kind of had this aha moment where I woke up in the middle of the night. It wasn't a dream or anything. And I actually, it was like I heard a voice saying, open your own restaurant. And I was like, oh, right, come on. It was like, what? I don't want to get all woo woo.
That wasn't a nightmare, was it?
Sometimes I think it's a nightmare, but yeah, and I kept thinking about it. I was like, "Well, come on, you got to be kidding me." I was like, "Well, how am I going to do that?" And I was like, "Well, you know enough. I mean, you're just as smart as as anybody that you've ever seen in this business, and you've got a little bit of money now, and you've got, it's probably the right time and right place." And the more I kept thinking about, you go back to sleep and you get up the next day and you're like, okay, wait a minute, what was that, a dream? And the more I kept sitting with it, I thought, yeah, why not? So I went to Mark, and at that point I was working at the tile shop. I said, okay, if I'm going to do this, let's do some research. Let's really test it out. And the first thing I knew I had to do was, do I really want to be back in the restaurant business? It had been years since I'd been working in a restaurant. So I asked Mark, I said, hey, is there anything I can do at Water Bar? Because I want to do this. I want to start my own restaurant, and I just want to test out, see. He said, so they found a way I worked in the private dining room, and just occasionally whenever they'd need extra help, and I'd go in. And it just felt like, it's like riding a bike. Once you do it, you love it. It felt great. I was very happy to be back in the restaurant, and I knew at that point it was right. And so at that point, then it was just, I kind of had to figure out what the concept would be. Once I realized I wanted to go back into the restaurant, I really wanted to start my own place. Then it was all about trying to find the right concept. And I spent a lot of, first I just wanted to get a small little, I knew I wanted a neighborhood place. I wanted to, I think I'd seen the Steve Martin movie Shop Girl, and I had this little fantasy about being the shop girl. It's just a little place that I could handle. I had seen a lot of bad partnerships go wrong. Mark and Pat had already wound up, with the whole Knicks Cove fiasco, and it was in 2008, the downturn of the market, and they just wound up spending too much money on it. And I didn't, we had lots of friends and family who had invested in that, and I didn't want to turn to anybody and say, hey, I'm sorry, but I lost your money. I can't pay you back. I didn't want to have partners that I had to argue with about what I wanted on the menu. I didn't want to do all that. So I knew it was a small place I wanted to do. I wanted to try this on my own. First, I just wanted to have like a little breakfast lunch place. And I started looking, everywhere I started going to all the little restaurants that I thought, anything I thought I would like to sort of emulate. I started collecting photographs, pictures, menus from places, and looking at lease signs. I would all of a sudden, now my radar was leases. This is for lease. And in the beginning, I didn't really, I wasn't working with anybody, and no brokers. And that was kind of dumb. I mean, I didn't know any better at that point. The whole thing of, once you decide to do this, there's so much research that has to take place. And that was sort of where I was at, just research. And what happened was the pizza thing, I used to love to go to Pizzeria Pico. And at that point, Bruce Hill was a good friend of mine who had worked at Stars. He ran the pizza station at Stars with Jeremiah. And I used to love to go there and later at night, and you could sit at the bar and have a beautiful, excellent meal. You could order from the main dining room and they'd bring it in. The pizzas were incredible. You didn't have to be with anybody. You could just be a single there sitting at the bar, and the staff was all friendly, and they had the crackling fire going. And I was like, this is it. This is exactly what I want to do. And it was at that, once I realized that it was, pizza place that I wanted to do. And because I always tell people, pizza's like the little black dress. You can dress it up, you can dress it down. You can still make it, you can do quality work, you can care about what you're doing, you can get the finest ingredients and put it on that pizza and be really proud of what you're serving. In some ways it can be fine dining. You have a wonderful wine list, but it's casual, it's family style. Parents can come in with their kids. And I was living, and I still live in San Anselmo, and I knew I wanted to do something in my neighborhood. And San Anselmo is a family town, so I knew that would work. So once I got locked into the concept or the idea, then I knew there was a lot of work I had to do, and even more than I realized at that point in terms of getting ready to do a restaurant. So
I got
yeah.
it. So
Once-
what surprised you about owning and running your restaurant that you weren't expecting? What were the surprises that popped up that you weren't anticipating when you opened your restaurant?
Well, I kind of wanted to backtrack and keep going on this whole idea about getting open, because there was a lot of room between realizing I wanted to do a pizza place, and because I only had so much, all my experience was front of the house. And I knew I needed, first of all, the first thing I did was I went and got training. I went to the Verace Pizza Neapolitana school down in LA, and I got certified as a Pizzaiola.
Oh. How long was that program for?
It was only about a week. It was about a week long, but so these guys, this Italian group, and they were running a restaurant in LA, and they were doing the USA version of the school in Naples. And after meeting them, I did wind up taking a trip to Naples and doing a little staging at some of their restaurants there.
Oh.
But so it was a certification course. Then it was in their restaurant. So you spent a day kind of learning everything, and then they threw you on the line, and it was like we were making mozzarella. It was how to make the dough, how to cook it in the oven. And it was a wonderful little school and certification program. And I loved it. Again, each step of the way, it was like I felt like, oh, this is it. This is it. I knew I was on the right path. But the biggest thing that what I did was I had a book, and I made a list of all the people that I thought could help me. And for anyone who's thinking about doing this and starting their own restaurant, and they're at the point of looking for a location right now. I put lots of offers in on places before, and they fell through, and I'm really glad they did, because it would have been a terrible location. It wasn't right. I didn't have enough information and research done yet. And so I want to just tell people to be patient. And sometimes it seems like this process takes so long, and finding the right place, and sometimes I think things fall through for the right reason, and we don't even realize it. We get all, oh man, I lost that place, and it's all this heartache, and it's tragic. It's I'm never going to find the right place. But each time you're learning something in that process. And that happened to me a lot. I think I might have put in about 4 offers before Pizzalina at the shopping center actually transpired. And in that time, I did find a broker. He wasn't a restaurant broker. He was a commercial broker, but he did help me with aspects of a lease negotiations that I didn't know anything about. I actually hired the Vine. Is it the
Yeah.
Vines, right. I hired Ed to help me with the lease, because I had no idea.
Pick the right guy. He was a lovely guy.
He was
Lovely guy.
And unfortunately, he's no longer with us. What a great asset to our local business. But
I'll tell you, since you're talking about Ed, because he's got a fond place in my heart. Ed was, just for your background, this gentleman, Ed Lewine, that she's talking about, he's actually from Canada, and he was trained as a chef, but he decided he wanted to get into business. So he got into Stanford's graduate school and got an MBA from Stanford. And then he got some really big jobs. He worked as CFO of Bill Fornio. He worked as a CEO of some larger companies, big restaurant companies. And then after he paid his dues with all these big positions, he decided to open up his own restaurant. And he came he interacted with my father and I. We had a restaurant in Green Bay, right off Sir Francis Drake Boulevard. And I guess word was out that we were going to be leasing. We also owned the building, and we were going to be leasing out the restaurant. And so he heard about it. He came to visit with us, and we looked at his resume, and we were very impressed. But however, he never owned his own restaurant. So as much as we hated to tell him no, because he hadn't owned his own restaurant, it's one thing running a big chain of restaurants, but owning your own is a totally different, experience, as Louise is discussing right now. And so we rejected him, and we thought, that would be the end of my relationship with Ed Levine. And as it turned out, when I became a restaurant broker, we did a lot of reciprocal business. If somebody needed a consultant, an operational or financial consultant, Ed was the man. And if someone needed to sell the restaurant, I was the man. So we did a lot of reciprocal business back and forth, and we became very good friends as a result. And I was, always very concerned about, rejecting him. But as it turned out, he found a location, which is still there in Larkspur, Left Bank. And it's a great restaurant. He's opened several other restaurants. Unfortunately, he passed a few years ago, in his early 60s. Very sad. But he was a lovely man.
Wonderful guy. And he helped me so much. He almost kind of like took me under his wing, and I knew nothing about lease negotiation. I didn't know what I could ask for. And he was like, oh no, you got to get the TI money. You got to get this, you got to get that there, and I was like, I didn't even know you could ask for these things. So get help. That's another one of my points. So in my list of all the people who could help me, I just went and said, listen, can I come and just interview you, informational interview? I want to pick your brain. In the case of Pico and Rosso those two pizzerias, after I had completed my training, I just fell in love with making pizzas so much. I had done some early tests and stuff at my house, but I knew I couldn't do it in a restaurant sort of setting. So I went in and I asked Bruce, and I asked John at Rosso if I could just come stage. I would work for free just to keep my hands in the dough until I could find a location. And they very graciously said, yeah. So I worked a couple of days a week, at least for free, just cranking out pizzas with the guys. And it was a lot of fun. But in the meantime, I was looking for location. I was talking to contractors. I think through Bruce, I found my contractor, Josh Klein, who is all he did is restaurants. And through him, I found a architect. Because actually, when we did find the location, it was a teardown. I mean, I thought first we went in there and it had been a round table pizza.
Right.
Huge space. It was 3,600 square feet. And I was like, oh no, I can't do that. It was just freaked me out. That's too big. I thought, well, if I fail, I can't deal with that. And so the broker had the idea of proposing it to the landlord to split the building and put in two, they put in a high-tech burrito. Was it high-tech burrito?
I think, yeah, high-tech is right next to you.
Right next to us. So that worked out perfect. And through those contacts, it's just like one thing just starts falling. It's like the dominoes, everything just starts falling into place. And I really do recommend hiring the best. I've seen so many people get an architect or get a builder or get somebody who doesn't know the restaurant business, and they wind up, you might spend a little bit more money for a contractor that knows restaurants, that's all they do, but you save so much money because, and also in a town that you're going to go into, or at least a county, they know all the new codes, they know. And I've just seen people have to redo things so many times because they didn't have the right people on board. So it might seem like a lot of money, but don't be afraid to spend that, because in the long run, you're going to save yourself time and redo money.
For sure.
So you need to find, you can't do this alone. You need to find people to help you. And so just start talking to everybody. I found a bookkeeper who has become my best friend, and she has a company called FI Administrators. That's all she does. She's worked in the industry as long as I have or longer. And through her, I got a great payroll company. You just need to get, because if you don't, I didn't know everything. I only knew what I knew. And so I knew that I had to fill in, and whether that's getting a partner, if you're not a chef, or if you're not, if you're a chef and you're not a front of the house person or a business person, get yourself some people, even if it's, or hire them on offer, bonus structure, something where there's skin in the game, so that you don't do this all yourself, because it takes a village, as they say.
But you did Pizzalina by yourself, right? You didn't have any partners.
I did. And in some ways there's some things about it that became very exhausting, and it was too much. But for all the little things that I couldn't, like I said, I would hire temporary or the best that I could find. Sometimes finding a chef was always hard. That was really hard.
How did you find your first chef?
My opening chef. So, once I knew what I wanted to do, and I got the money. So
Money, yeah.
So when I first started all this, everybody told me, small business loan, no problem. You're a woman, easy peasy. So I go to I have my first meeting with and at this point, I've got my business plan. I got all the pictures and the pro formas, and I got my numbers out and everything. And they looked at me and they laughed. They weren't, at that point, Small Business Administration was not giving money to restaurants. They said, we've got people coming in with restaurants 10 times the size of yours, and then we're saying, no, it's too risky. So I was like, oh, great. So anyway, I wound up putting up my house, putting up everything I owned.
Wow.
But so that's something to think about now. Like the people who bought Pizzalina, and you guys helped them with the whole small business loan. That seems, and somebody I'm consulting with now too, they've got a small business loan. So I guess the whole climate has shifted. I'm not sure if it's the pandemic or what, but it seems like the government is much more willing to help small businesses out. But
so you took a big risk there. You mortgaged your house and
yeah, I put up everything
with 2 hands, 2 feet, the whole 9 yards. Wow, that's gutsy.
A little money. And again, like I said, I didn't want to take on partners because I didn't want to have to look at anybody and say, I can't pay you back.
Yeah, for sure.
Told me.
So how did it go? Give us the steps of putting the whole place together. Once you raised the money, you at what point did you sign the lease?
Well, so the landlord was great. I think I signed it took a little bit. It took about almost 5 or 6 months to sign the lease. The landlord was always out of town. I think we kind of agreed to agree. Let's see, we opened in 2010. We in 2009, I think we agreed on it. I think we actually signed the lease in April of 2010, and Josh Klein came in, and we already had, I guess we already had the drawings. Yeah, between him and Bill, the architect, they literally, Josh broke ground on Memorial Day, and we were open September 26th. So and like I said, this is why I find somebody who knows what they're doing.
Yeah, Josh is an excellent contractor.
What was that? 4 months? And the only thing that held us up was the front. We had a problem with the front door. Otherwise, we would have been open on schedule for the beginning for Labor Day weekend. Yeah. But so it was just, and he helped me so much. There were little things that came up in the building where he was like, that's really a landlord thing. I wouldn't have known. He says, I'm going to go to bat for you. We're going to get that taken care of, and it'll come back out of the final payments and stuff. They need to pay for that. And he was great. And then the landlord did put in, he loaned me some money. He gave me a bit of a loan, and he also wound up putting in TI money. So in
addition to TI money, excuse me, did they give you any kind of free rent?
Yes, I didn't have to pay rent until we opened.
Oh, that's good. Okay.
Yeah, and he so this is another thing. At the line, when he helped me on the lease, he said, try and get out of that guarantee. And I fought for it, but the landlord said no. And then, but when push came to shove, he did take it out of the lease. So, I think he wanted to see that I would, it's all, it's all negotiation, and you can't take everything. You've got to be able to give back. And so,
Well,
I
the
think-
landlord had experience with several restaurants in that shopping center, and he knew in talking to you that you were the real deal. You paid your dues. Your
Right.
chance of success would be great. You knew what you were doing, and so he was willing to take a risk.
There was somebody who wanted to do the same thing I did. I won't mention any names, but they didn't have he had more experience, really, I thought, than I did, but he didn't have the finances. So it is a package, I think the landlord saw that I had the experience, I had the financing, I had a good business plan. He liked the concept, he knew it was right for the neighborhood. And so I just kind of had everything that they were looking for.
So once the place came together, construction wise, what was it like ramping up, hiring employees, getting them trained,
So,
getting opened, etc.?
yeah, I don't remember who I was using at that point. There's so many now. There's all these companies that will, online companies, you can find people. I found my first chef early on to kind of get the whole ball off, get the ball rolling and get everything going. He seemed good on paper, and the tastings, we did tastings, everything was good. And I said, listen, I can't really hire you for, this was early on. I think we're probably 2 months out or something, 3 months out. I said, I'm going to have to ask you to, wait until we're about a month out or 2 months out, and then we can start working on it. And everything was great. And then as we got closer and closer to the date, things were coming up and things were, sketchy. And I don't know, I think the day of our first training with the whole staff, we got everybody. Pat Cole from Marinitas was a lifesaver. He came in, I was like, oh my God, I got, I'm going to start our staff training. I'm freaking out. He's like, don't worry. He said, I'm going to come in. I'll handle the whole thing for you. He came in with whiteboards. He came in with coffee and donuts.
Oh,
He
nice.
because at that point we're like looking at 2 weeks out, and I was about ready to lose it. And he saved the day.
So who put together the menu?
I did. I put together the menu, formatted it and everything, the logo, the fonts, all that. I knew from restaurant, I'd gone to LA. I'd just done so much research. I had a folder this big full of stuff that I wanted to, I knew. I went to restaurantowner.com and got all the, templates for manuals and hiring and packets and all that stuff. And all my friends came together one day and we just, stuffed packets, employee packets. And, but the chef didn't show up the night of our opening party.
Oh my God.
I mean, I knew it was going to happen because he didn't show up for the training either. He had some excuse. He had some physical problem, but, it's this business. I very endearingly say it attracts misfits, and I am one. We're an odd breed, and there's always something. So not the most stable of personalities, but anyway, that was crazy. So in a panic, I called 2 people. One guy that I had worked with Rosso, who had left Rosso, and he was sort of freelancing, and another guy that I had interviewed at one point for the job, and he looked really good to me. And I called him in a panic. I said, my chef didn't show up. I said, can you come? And they were like, we'll be there, no questions asked. They came, and at the end of the night, so this was a friends and family opening night thing. It wasn't a lot of pressure. It was all buffet style. And but at the end of the night, one of the guys, the guy that I didn't really know, the night was all done and everybody's all chatty. He's not chatty at all. He's got the clipboard. He's in the walk-in. He's figuring out the purchase order for the next day. I said, you're hired. So that's how I got my chef. That was my opening chef. He didn't last either because of some sexual harassment misconduct. Anyway, but the one thing I did start with 2 key people who I had when I was working at Pico. they were two of my favorite people at Pico. And I always told them, I said, listen, when I get Pizzalina open, I said, if you guys aren't doing, if you're whatever, I would love to have you be my chef. One was a chef, and he did actually wound up, he had left Pico and he was working at a few places. We kept in contact, and he wound up being like my sous chef. He kind of ran things during the day. And then Kelly, who was a waitress there, and I said, I want you to be my manager. And she had left Pico in the interim. And so those are the two anchors that I had. From there, it was just local people and kids for, servers and extra chefs.
So once you opened, did you have a big initial surge of curiosity seekers coming in, or how did it work out? How you market your business so people knew you were open?
Well, Facebook was I think already going. I think we got the Facebook going. We had the big sign up. I didn't really do a lot. I'm trying to remember what I did. Oh, I did Yelp. So I did, Yelp has all these different packages, and I think I signed up with Yelp for the first 3 months just to get our name out there. But what happened was the funniest thing. So I didn't want to do a big grand opening. I didn't want that pressure. I wanted a slow, soft opening, so that we could all just get used to things. And one of the funniest things that happened was we'd been open about, I don't know, 3 weeks, a month, maybe, not even. And this mom comes in and she says, you know why we're here? This actually was a family, mom and dad, kids, 2 kids come in. It was for dinner. And she said, you know why we're here? And I was like, no. I said, tell me. She said, well, my son was at school today at San Domenico, and she said it was show and tell, and one kid got up and was talking all about Pizzalina for show and tell, and she said the kid asked, like, how many of you been to Pizzalina? And she said the whole classroom was like, oh, their hands all go up. And she said my son was like very sad that he didn't have his hand up and hadn't been there, so we had to come for dinner. So that's what happened. And we were a hit with the families. We were a hit with the neighborhood. Again, it helps that I've lived in San Anselmo forever. My son went to San Domenico, so he knows, we kind of, as a family, we know the staff there, we know the faculty. And I think a lot of, it all just kind of, what goes around comes around. And that's when I realized, and as we've seen with the pandemic, we'll probably talk about it a little bit later, being a part of your community is huge. It's huge. And it's one of the most rewarding parts about it.
So what specifically did you do? What things did you do to interact with the community? Were you involved in any fundraisers for the local schools?
We donated so much to schools. I have one of my cherished, we had coloring stuff, Pizzalina coloring stuff. The kids had come in. I had the paintings all over my wall from the kids in the office. We donated to everything we could, really. All of the schools, whether it was sports, arts, music. We had a Tie That Tuesday program where every Tuesday we'd give back. And then anything that would come up that I just felt was important for us to be involved in, we would become involved in and make or we supported the local softball teams and soccer teams, Pizzalina jerseys and stuff.
Sure. So for the audience, excuse me, that's not familiar with San Anselmo. San Anselmo is basically a bedroom community. It's not highly accessible for tourists. So basically, you have to live by the locals, and so you have to do a really good job because you don't have other markets to augment in big surge in San Francisco with conventioners coming in or tourists coming in. San Anselmo is and a lot of parts of Marin County are basically oriented to a local market. So you have to especially do a good job because word of mouth is so important, especially now with all the social media websites. Boy, if you do a mediocre job, you're going to alienate your market really quickly.
Oh yeah, and we saw some cases of that in our town. So I mean, that's when you asked, what surprised me about owning my own business. And that was probably the biggest surprise, because once you get open, you have no good, I spent years. I think I came up with the idea in 2008 and we opened in 2010. So I spent all this time laboring and designing every aspect of it, the menu, the fonts, down to the interior, the fabric choices, the colors, blah, blah, blah. And you get open and you have no control over who is your customer. You have no control over who your employees. You have control over who your employees are in the beginning, your first hire. But from that, you have no control over who stays, who comes, who goes, who fills in. And it's this really interesting thing. It takes on a life of its own. And all of a sudden you go from being this, you're molding the clay to somebody who's just kind of sitting back and kind of corralling and keeping it sort of channeled and in line if you can, and then things come up that are completely like the pandemic and catastrophes. And I think the first 2 weeks we were open, we lost all our power, and I had no, somebody on Sir Francis Drake got in an accident and all our power went out on a Friday night. I didn't know what to do with the POS system. Everything went down. The fire was still cranking. We could still make pizzas, but I didn't have a backup kit, So there's all these little things that happen that you really aren't expecting, that are good and bad. Some, like I said, the fact that we were a hit right off the bat with kids and families was great, because that just snowballed and got bigger and bigger. And we got known for a place that people, because this generation now, they're working in the city. They know good food. They know good wine. They want a great place they can eat, but they also want to take their kids and not feel like it breaks the bank. So there's that. The decision making, there are so many choices to make every day. You are being called upon to solve problems and make decisions, and that becomes a little overwhelming. I don't think I was quite prepared for that, and that sort of exhaustion that you get from that. That's why I do say, there's part of me, I didn't want to do partners, but on the other hand, there would have been times where it would have been comforting.
Yeah,
and,
it was the right match, for sure.
Little things like that are daily, that kind of just eat away at you.
Yes. So what would you have done different in terms of how you would have approached opening up Pizzalina versus the way you actually did it?
Yeah, so I wouldn't have done anything. The only thing different I would have done would have been to start earlier. I wish I hadn't waited so long. I think I was in my 50s when I opened Pizzalina, and had I started in my 30s or 40s, I might have opened other locations and had more confidence in, and just taking it bigger. And so that's why I tell, do not be afraid to do this. If you really feel like you've got this in your heart and this is what you want to do, it's what you're being called to do it. Do not wait. The only thing I would say would be to find people, get partners. I know we go back and forth about this. Do it with your eyes wide open. There are problems with having a partner, and there are problems without having a partner. So
yeah. If I could interject for a minute on the partner side, because we tried when we had our restaurants, in order to keep the turnstile from turning for, hiring good people, going up the ranks, maybe starting as a dishwasher, becoming a cook, becoming an assistant manager, and they were with us for many years. And we to basically minimize vulnerability that they would take a hike, we put this managing partner program in, where they, for very little money, mainly through their through sweat equity, they could own a 20% interest in the restaurant. It was sort of similar to how Sambo's structured their fraction of the action program. And then they could buy 5% shares of other units. But what we found out was that the whole mentality of the ownership side versus an employee side was like day and night, and they became by and large very independent. And so on their own, they wanted to deviate from our standard operated procedures. We would have to frequently tell them, point to the name of the restaurant. It's called Zim's, not, whatever their name was. And you've got to follow the basic guidelines. If you have some specific changes you want to make, we're certainly welcome to listen to them and hear them. So by and large, that didn't work. So that's not to say that, as Louise has suggested, that a partner might work, but it's best that you have a pre-existing relationship with them, that you actually worked with them, so you understand each other's strengths and weaknesses. So there's no surprises, because unfortunately, in a lot of the transactions we do, the reason they're selling is because of partnership disputes. There are two partners involved. One partner's maybe spending 20% of his time in, the other's spending, 80% of the time, and they aren't taking on the responsibilities equally, and there's all kinds of conflicts that develop, et cetera. So you've got to be very selective, and it's important, I think, to have someone that and you've worked with.
Yeah, and have a good
better chance of it working.
Agreement where all these things are spelled out.
For sure. So
Start soon.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Don't hesitate. Go.
No, you go. Your words are more welcome than mine.
Hey, that's the only thing I would have done differently. Don't hesitate. Just jump in. I wouldn't have waited as long as I did.
So what aspect of the restaurant were you most proud of?
The community. Having a successful restaurant would be the first thing. I felt very proud that our finances were good, our customer base was good, and when I did decide to sell, I had a viable, sellable restaurant. So I'm very proud of that. I'm really proud of the fact that I wound up giving a lot of young kids their first job and training them and, mentoring them. I still have, some of these kids who are now not kids, they're adults, they still will write me or text me and say, hey, you did this, or this happened, and it reminded me of something you said. And I'm so grateful for, my first job there. And that really touches me. That I'm very proud of.
Sure. So pizza lends itself obviously to takeout. Before COVID, like what % of your sales were takeout versus in-house takeout delivery?
So we did probably, let me see if I remember the numbers. I'd say it was probably anywhere from 12 to 20, close to 30% takeout before good day or a bad day. Then the pandemic hit.
Right.
That's another thing. Never say never. I poo-pooed DoorDash. Actually, a lot of the way that one of the reasons why I decided to sell. I mean, I was already thinking about retiring. When am I going to retire? And I was seeing changes in the restaurant business going to much more casual and takeout, and the DoorDash and all these delivery companies. And in the beginning, I was like, no way. They would sign in the beginning. They were just signing up restaurants. They would take your menu, put it on their line, and we were getting phone calls for these companies. We didn't even know what they were. And I was really upset because, 30%, DoorDash in the beginning was taking 30%. It's like, I don't even make 30% half the time, so that's crazy. And I said, never. And I was actually rude to some people some of these salespeople on the phone. And I was like, no, we're never going to do DoorDash. Well, then the pandemic hit and I had to eat crow, as they say, and I called them up desperate. And I said, listen, I'm very sorry. I've been, we have not used you. But now it's a necessity. And so it saved us during the pandemic for sure. Even though the community, I have some photos of the counters just stacked full of pizza boxes during that whole time. We had a lot of loyal customers who came in 2-3 times. And we got to the point during the pandemic where we literally, I was like, sell anything that's not nailed down. We did a wine program where we were selling bottled wines for half off. People would come in and buy cases of wine from us and then just leave the change. People were so generous. That was one of the sweetest things. They would come in and order stuff to go. And the few servers that I was able to keep that would man down the fort there, they'd order a $25 pizza or their meal would be 25. They'd leave $100 and walk away and say, keep it, Luis, thank you.
Nice.
Luis was my manager who
Yeah.
was taking all those orders. But yeah, so with the pandemic, they went up, well, it was 100% at one point. We never closed. I think we never closed. They shut us down and we closed. We already had a patio. We started with a patio, so that saved us
Yes.
during the pandemic. We did have to close the restaurant, but we kept right on with takeout, and most of our clients did just switch right over. But we did need DoorDash for sure.
Right. So what are the three major reasons why restaurant owners fail in the business? And as we know, for basically non-chain, non-franchise, independently operated restaurants, the failure rates like 50% the first 3 years and 80% the first 5 years. It's horrendous. And yet Louise had a very successful restaurant, even through COVID. We sold her restaurant through COVID and we got a very good price for it. And she, was able to pivot and keep her sales strong through COVID and her profits strong. But, she's the exception to the rule. So from your perspective, again, what are these three main reasons why so many restaurants do fail in the business?
I think probably the biggest one is have a really clear concept. And when I say that, I mean like down to the nth degree. I mean, they say location, but location is part of the concept.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to, again, Pizzalina was a casual family style pizza restaurant in a town that was full of young families. So everything kind of lined up. Have a mission statement, so that anytime something happens or you have a question, you can always refer back to that mission. Am I taking care of people, feeding my community with whole natural food, whatever your mission statement wants to be. At the end of the day, will this accomplish that? Make sure that, the type of service, like I see people want to do all this fast food service and they wind up with a line out the door and now it's not fast food anymore. They can't, it's just make sure everything is conceptually clear, and then don't waver. Like when we opened Pizzalina, people say, oh, well, we didn't do a TV screen. We wanted more of a family, intimate sort of restaurant. Everybody pressured us to get a TV screen. I wouldn't do it because I just didn't feel like it was part of our concept. And, people want you to, do deep dish pizza or do this kind of, why don't you do buffalo wings? I was like, no, it's not Italian. It's not Naples. I tried to make sure that, our menu was driven by a very small locale, whether it was Naples inspired food, pizza, wine, or our area. I would shop at the farmer's market. All that stuff needs to be, I felt, because people are always going to want you to do something different. And they're going to say, oh, well, that place down the street. And what happens is you become diluted and then you don't stand for anything.
Right.
So I think it's important to really stand behind who you are, what you believe in. And eventually it might take more time. People might want to try, oh, well, they're doing this over here, but they'll come back to you if they believe and trust in what you are giving them. And that's all part of the concept. So that's one thing. Number two, I would say is business. This is, at the end of the day, this is still a business. Don't mess around. Don't take it lightly. You need to know your numbers at all time. I mean, I was always on the numbers. I had spreadsheets for everything. Every penny that went out the door and came in, I kept track of daily. I kept track of the weather. I kept track of the school calendar so that I could see and track historically, oh, do we need to close earlier in this week because everybody's out of school or the kids all go on vacation in July? We need to plan for that. You need to, so next year, oh, this is a slow time for us. Maybe we'll cut back on the schedule. You need to know what you're paying for everything. Don't make the mistake of thinking you're going, I hope people wouldn't think, oh, I'm just going, I like this business. It's fun. or whatever, it's still a business at the end of the day. And you have to be smart with it. Every penny that goes out the door is money that goes out the door, So especially now, it's very hard with the way that labor shortages and all the increasing costs and delivery, it's eating away at profit. So you have to be very careful with your money.
So why did you sell?
Well, I had been thinking about retiring. Got to that age and I was like, okay, well, I don't want to, and I was having a few health issues and I didn't want to wind up falling over on the floor in the middle of a Friday night. So that's what made me started thinking about it. And then I had also started to see the writing on the wall. The restaurant business was changing before the pandemic hit. And all the reasons that I fell in love with this business and wanted to go into this business, and I don't want to sound snobby, but it's more from the fine dining aspect and really caring about people, and hospitality is kind of a thing of the past, is what I'm seeing. It's like the younger generation, they don't seem to care as much about it. And I even see this when I was, when Jeremiah first started and all this new wave of restaurants and gourmet and bistros and stars, and there was already the dinosaurs that were sort of moving out of the older generation, and the Blue Fox and the Ernie's and the Venezi's, and those restaurants were like heading out. And then there was this whole new wave of restaurants, and now it's almost happening again. I see there's this much more casual attitude towards dining, whether it's from the operator, and I think it's from the operator because the customers aren't demanding it. And there's sort of a lot of takeout, and that's eating away at profitability. People just don't want to dine out. When they do dine out, especially with families, there's not a lot of interaction. It's, a lot of people are on their phones, and it's a different industry. That's all I'll say. And
that's for sure. That's for sure.
I see myself staying in, and then the pandemic hit, and I stayed in the pandemic to make sure that we stayed alive. I felt like I was like the captain of the ship and had to keep it from like sinking.
Well, you did a good job.
Once I felt like we were kind of at least going to be able to make it through, that's when we had actually signed to put this up for sale during the pandemic.
Right. And by the way, we found a very, as professional as Louise is, we found an equally professional buyer, and it was just a perfect marriage. Yeah, in fact, we're going to bring Michael, the buyer, on the show, and maybe we'll bring Louise back so you can see the chemistry, that positive chemistry that exists between them, which is, believe me, is not always the case when you sell a business.
Yeah.
But there's a very strong mutual admiration between the buyer and the seller, and consequently the buyer is opening up a second Pizzalina in the East Bay.
I feel like a grandma.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So tell the group what you're doing now.
Now I'm enjoying my life. I'm spending time going back to some of the artistic endeavors that I love. I'm playing music. I've been a musician my life, and I'm doing consulting. That's how I'm keeping my foot in the door. And I really love helping people, small operators like myself, with just kind of almost like hand holding, little pieces of the puzzle that they made, especially if they're just taking over a restaurant or just bought or just starting. I remember when I was first starting, there were so many little pieces of it that I didn't know, and would reach out to different people and just like little consulting things like, oh, help me get my inventory set up. Boom, done. Thank you. And so little things like that, operational help, where people just don't have the confidence, or it's not quite working for them, and I can kind of walk in and just see exactly how to help them out.
Yes. So you're helping them with operational items like menu design, financials and spreadsheets, and marketing, social media.
because I did all of our social media at Pizzalina.
Sure. So unfortunately, we're running to the end of our time. Tell people how they can get in touch with you. Since Louise, has an active consulting business. She prefers working with smaller clients. Tell the audience what's the best way to get in touch with you.
I am on Louise Franz at sbcglobal.net. You can email me, or my phone number is 415-999-2970.
Okay, thank you. Our next Restaurant Dealmaker show will be on January 12th. We're taking a break for the holidays. We figure everyone's going to be preoccupied with the holidays. And our co-hosts will be Matthew and Trissy's Englehart, the founders of Cafe Gratitude. I think it's appropriate to start off the beginning of the year to remind ourselves of the need to be grateful in everything we do. In fact, when I was dealing with the Engleharts, I always got a kick if I called Matthew and he wasn't there. He had a voicemail, and the first thing he would say is, "Tell us what you are grateful for today." And that's the whole basis of their business. It's a vegan business. I had the pleasure of working with them doing 4 transactions in the Bay Area. They currently own 6 restaurants in Southern California. And they're also, besides being restaurant operators, they are farmers. They grow a lot of their own product. They're authors. They've written several books, and they're podcasters. And they have a very unique philosophy in doing business. And we're really grateful to have them. People, always accuse them of, how can you be so busy in life? And their response is, well, we believe by being busy, our life is full. And they certainly exhibit that for sure. So thank you for joining us. Louise, thank you very much for your participation today. I loved your candid, spontaneous responses, and you're a true pro. And she's from the old school. And we don't see a lot of old school people that really have a passion for people. They love what they do, and they take real pride in executing and maintaining, quality service and excellent product. And Louisa's definitely exemplifies that. So thank you very much for sharing that with us today. We appreciate it. So I want to wish all of you, since I won't be talking to you again to January with the Engleharts, I want to wish you all a very healthy and happy holiday season. And thank you for joining us today. Bye, Louise. Thanks. Thanks so much.